There we go.
Oh, there we go. Okay, excellent. So you guys are in for a total treat tonight. This may be the most rip-offiest rip-off movie ever. Like, this is kind of the king of rip-off movies. In that the film, it's kind of created in the eyes of Jaws, and we'll talk more about kind of the sharksploitation history in a bit. But Cruel Jaws is specifically created to be a Jaws sequel, but it is using footage from a couple of different sources. It steals footage from Jaws. It steals footage from Joe D'Amato's film Deep Red or Deep
Blood.
Deep
which
Blood.
I
Thank you.
I haven't seen.
I'm sure it's Joe D'Amato. I'm sure it's kind of porny. Most of his films are these weird horror crossovers that are neither sexy nor horror. They're just like horror porny.
I find them both sexy and horrific, but that's okay.
I'd say that is a good way to describe
It's all about
them.
taste.
It is. And then we've also got a little bit of Great White, aka The Last Shark, which is a Vic Morrow film in here as well.
Which in turn was accused of ripping off Jaws and taken legal action and banned as a result. So what we really have, I don't know if you have any PhDs in the house, but this is a Baudrillard project where we're watching a Xerox of a Xerox of a Xerox. And what's cool about the Xerox is somehow it's more entertaining than almost all the others that came before it.
I think we're going to coin the term a Baudrillard tonight because this
is Baudrillard.
This is a Baudrillard. So yeah, this is a copy of a copy of a copy, which somehow is more interesting than a lot of the originals. So this was actually released in many, many countries as Jaws 5 because copyright laws, though we are very strict on them and have very stringent about it here in the US, when you get into other countries, not so much, which is how you can suddenly steal The Last Shark, Deep Blood, Jaws, and a whole bunch of other films and mash it into this amalgam that is Cruel Jaws, and then also shoot some crazy new footage and heavy gore scenes. This is by far one of the goriest of the sharksploitation films. So history of sharksploitation, Elric, do you think we should do it now or should we wait till after the movie?
I think we can tee up. Well, let's just tee up a little bit of sharksploitation and a little. Let me start before we do that. Let's just mention the director. Okay, so because I mentioned Baudrillard, you know we're going classy. Bruno Mattei, sometimes called the ripoff master. 3 movies that very kind of Criterion type ones you've probably heard of: Woman's Prison Massacre, Rats, Night of Terror, and Hell of the Living Dead. That's your starters.
I can't believe you left out Shocking Dark.
Well, I'm going to get to it because what's cool about him is you wonder about their copyright laws. But here's the thing. If your name changes enough, so Bruno Mattei is under this film, he made it under William Snyder. But we're going to say Bruno Mattei, a.k.a. Jordan B. Matthews, Jimmy Mateus, Gilbert Russell, Axel Berger, Michael Cardoso, David Hunt, Werner Knox, Pierre LeBlanc, Stefan Oblowski, and Vincent Dawn. These are all aliases. He has the most aliases of any living director in the history of making movies, which I think in its own right is like some sort of Andy Kaufman performance art shit. I love it. And he probably for good reason. I have to imagine some of this was to avoid a prison. I don't know.
Prison over and over. And Bruno Mattei is still at it. Like when you all watch this film, even when I watch this film, it feels very much like the sharksploitation films that come out of the 1970s, where they are just throw in as much shit against the wall as they can to see what sticks. Oh, you want sexiness? Cool. We can add, here's a whole bunch of nudity. Oh, you want shark action, gore. Okay, we need some manliness. People liked that in the original Jaws. We'll throw that in there too. And it feels very exploitive, but this movie is from the 90s. And most of the filmmakers by the 90s were kind of like, okay, we learned our lesson. We know better than to go that exploitive now. There's a subtlety to it. But not Bruno Mattei. Like he is still doing the shit. He is still making zombie films that are basically just Cannibal Holocaust, but he's still doing it today. So
he did it right up until he died. I mean, he was making movies. I think he made 50 plus right up until I think he died maybe 2007 or something like that.
It's within a decade or so.
And he was working right up until the end, and he was ripping off. So you brought up probably one of his other kind of classic, most obvious ripoffs, Shocking Dark, which is taking Aliens, basically a riff on Aliens. You've got Robo War, which literally basically has RoboCop on one of the posters, which is actually a ripoff more of Predator, but with a robot, which is great. He had to finish Lucio Fulci's Zombie 3. So again, we were talking about zombie ripoffs last 2 weeks ago. It was almost finished by Fulci, but then it was kind of abandoned, and he came in and finished the direction on that. So he has, just to me, like a really interesting eclectic career. He did nunsploitation, he did Nazi PlayStation, he did sharksploitation, zombies, anything you can, porn, anything you can imagine, he filmed it. And the one thing I think that we represent too is that this is somebody who, you know, we could sit around and make fun of on the Hollywood side, but unlike a lot of Hollywood films, his films are almost always really entertaining. And I've seen a lot of bigger budgeted films that do not entertain me or take a safe route. So, you know, let's not mock Bruno Mattei.
Definitely.
Let's celebrate his cruel jaws.
Yeah, Elric and I tend to have one rule with cinema. We will watch just about anything as long as it's not boring. Like that, and I think you've said that before, that is the only sin in cinema, is being boring.
I think that's Capra or somebody said that.
Yeah, somebody said it. But yeah, I'm paraphrasing as well, but don't be boring. And Bruno Mattei is never boring. And so but he has an aesthetic to him. Even, I mean, I've seen so many of his zombie ripoffs as well. And there is something that I continue watching through all of them. Like, you know, Bruno Mattei is Bruno Mattei, but at the same time, I'm going to watch it and I'm going to enjoy it.
You know, there was one cool fact about him that I read right before doing this that I didn't know, is that before he ever directed, he edited upwards of maybe 100 movies. And so makes a lot of sense that he would have a skill of combining different stories from totally different movies to create a new work of art. So I think that's, you know, that's kind of fun. But I mean, you know, like, it's just funny that we celebrate people like Godard for doing this exact thing, like drawing from different parts of cell and creating a new work that would be celebrated in a museum of modern art or something. Whereas Bruno Mattei, he has to, you know, basically fight lawsuits. So, you know, it's different how we see these things. But again, this is an entertaining movie. So I am excited here because I get to talk to you about one of your favorite topics in general. Because I was never somebody who watches Shark Week or anything like that, even though I think sharks are cool. I grew up in New Zealand swimming in the ocean a lot. And so therefore, I don't think I wanted to watch as much of this then, because a lot of our lives were swimming in oceans. But for you have, since I've known you, you've been obsessed by the deep sea. I've seen you do a great lecture on it, not just sharks, all creatures of the deep sea. I know a little bit about where that comes from, but for you, what about sharks in particular and shark films, you know, grab you outside just obviously Jaws?
Well, as you know, I grew up on the water. Like, my parents live on the Shenandoah River, and straight off of my parents' front yard, it is like 20 feet straight down. And so it was always kind of a sink or swim thing where, like, as soon as I was a kid, my dad was throwing me in. And so it was this constant, like, this is this amazing thing that we live next to, that we have fun with. We, you know, wake, board, we do all this amazing stuff. But at the same time, it was this constant fear for me as well of what is swimming beneath me. And I'm always in the water and I am always drawn to the ocean, but I'm never not aware of what's beneath me. And I actually found it's like a phobia. I later found, and I can't remember the name right now, but it is the fear of fathoms beneath you. And it's an actual fear. And so mine specifically came where I'm from in Virginia. We have these things called alligator gar, and they are massive. They grow to like 4.5 to 5 feet long. They have mouths like alligator, massive teeth sticking down, but they are so scared of people. Like, there is very few, I don't even think there's any like attacks on record of alligator gar. Like, they're huge, they're big, they're scary. But as soon as something bigger than them enters the water, they're gone. And, but even just seeing them, because they swim along the sides of the banks hunting for smaller fish, and they swim just below the surface. So you'll look into the water and you will see this massive thing with teeth there. But if you were to even put a foot in the water, they're gone before you could even blink. And so I, for some reason, kind of always pictured them as sharks in the water. For me, those were my sharks, knowing that I was dangling my feet in the water and somewhere 10 feet below were these things. And so that's where my fascination really began. Jaws obviously was a huge turning point for me, but not so much as Piranha. Like, Piranha fucked my shit up, to be honest.
Wait, sorry. If you're gonna go around saying piranha,
Piranha.
as Barbara says in the movie, piranha, one of my favorite pronunciations in any movie. But yeah, no, Piranha is definitely one of the biggest of the ripoffs, like the most straight. But because it's through Joe Dante, suddenly it's its own movie. It's super entertaining.
It's great.
Same
Yeah.
structure, yeah. So a lot of it was the structure
Mhm.
that was basically being borrowed movie after movie. And we saw it with almost any animal exploitation film.
Oh yeah.
And Grizzly, right? You can throw whatever it is and have the
Alligator. Yeah.
Alligator's a great one.
And we can talk more about the sharksploitation history, but after Jaws came out, that is when suddenly the gates were open. Like before Jaws, we maybe have one or two shark movies. There was an actual movie from the late 60s called Shark with an exclamation point, which was severely lacking in shark action.
Oh, was that Burt Reynolds one?
Mhm.
Or okay, I knew
Yeah.
Sam Fuller did one with it.
Yeah.
Burt, yeah.
And there's like barely any sharks in it, but sharks weren't really, a thing prior to that, at least not cinematically. And then Jaws happens and all bets are off and this massive gate opens and immediately we have this huge flood of shark cinema. Not even just from the States, it's coming from Spain, it's coming from Italy, it's coming from Mexico. And we're seeing it come from all different areas, but all of it with the intent of pushing it over to the States to get to American audiences. And a lot of times the filmmakers got sued. And we're
Well,
never
the
allowed
last
to
Shark
release it.
made about $14 million like in its first
In 2
week or two.
days.
Yeah, like straight away, and then got sued by Universal. So it goes to show these movies were actually, I mean, that also had a celebrity, an American celebrity in it. And Vic Morrow was in that one. So it's, again, we're at a different time where you could make money from drive-ins. You could actually make real bank. Like we kind of can now, I guess.
We're getting there again.
Yeah.
It's definitely making a return. But yeah, after Jaws, it was all about how many sharks can we stuff into a movie. And these were quick and dirty in a lot of cases. They were using stock footage in any capacity. Bruno Mattei, we've had decades in between this, but what we were seeing in the 90s when he made Cruel Jaws was we were kind of seeing a resurgence in the shark film. And a lot of it was happening on the B level, think like the sci-fi grade stuff, but we were starting to see it. And this actually continues and leads up to like late 90s when we actually do see like Deep Rising and Deep Blue Sea, and we see some big budget aquatic horror come back because we are seeing so much action on the B level, including Bruno Mattei.
What's that awesome one in the mall in Australia? And it gets...
Oh, it's not in a mall. It's a grocery store, and it's
a grocery
bait.
store.
Bait.
That is actually a pretty good one.
I love that one.
A shark, because it gets flooded. So all the people are stuck in a flooded shopping center and there's a shark. And it's just, and actually it sounds idiotic, but that's the last time I saw one where I was like, okay, actually kind of works.
It's transcendent in 3D and it does not get enough love in 3D. And I don't even know if there's a way to see it in 3D now, but it was originally presented as bait 3D.
Now I'm going to just suggest this and you guys can both say no, but instead of watching the movie, should we just talk about Jaws for the Revenge for the next 2 hours? Because Michael Kane deserves some love for the serial killer shark that follows the family's blood curse.
Let's just remember that a couple of years ago, this was probably 4 or 5 years ago, for Halloween, I dressed up as his wife from Jaws 4,
I love it.
The Revenge. And I had the full welding uniform on and the overalls and and I carried around a stuffed shark and 4 people got it. But
you also did Deep Rising, a great Deep Rising.
I did. That was another one nobody got.
Just a picture of this to put in the chat by the time the movie's over.
I'll have to see. I know I can find my Deep Rising one because for the Deep Rising, I bought this massive octopus costume and then I got a jet ski and I put 2 Barbie dolls on it and I dressed one up like Treat Williams and I carried it around and I was still explaining to people why I was an octopus carrying a jet ski.
That's pretty damn good.
The type of batshit crazy shit I do for Halloween. And nobody gets me, but that's okay.
But there was a lot of, I mean, we can talk about a couple deep cuts after the movie itself, but there was some attempts to also legitimize. I think Orca is one of the most fascinating movies because it is approached in a way. It feels like they're approaching it in a bigger way than Jaws.
Yeah.
Because Jaws in a way was an exploitation film in its way. And Spielberg wasn't Spielberg yet in that way that we think of him. And then Orca is Sir Richard Harris. Everything about it screams Oscar. They're trying from the score to the cinematography to the scale. And it's a pretty amazing movie in its own right. But again, it is still just tracing Jaws, 90% of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and the biggest thing with these films was always to have a great poster, always. Like The Last Shark, aka Great White, is by far one of the best.
The best.
Even behind me, I have an original theatrical one sheet from Up From the Depths. Shit movie. I mean, I love it in an aquatic horror sense, but it's not even one of the better of the sharksploitation. But that poster is so tight. Bava's Devilfish, all of these were just kind of made to have these amazing posters behind them, and Cruel Jaws included. Yes.
But I think people will have a lot of questions that we probably won't be able to answer about how this movie exists, and especially how on earth Severin finally got it to the masses, which we might never know the answer to. But
this was a hard one to release, and I do not know all the details, so I cannot answer questions on that. But I know that this was a hard one to release because it used footage from Jaws. It is basically just following a Jaws ripoff to the point that there were some lawsuits surrounding it. And it's using Castellari's Last Shark and D'Amato's Deep Blood. So with that, shall we check out some Cruel Jaws?
Do it.
Yeah.
All right. Everyone, you can let Elric know if this belongs at MoMA next in the next 95 minutes.
It's a Baudrillard.
MoMA's done crazier things.
All right. Enjoy Cruel Jaws, everyone. We'll see you in a few. Welcome back, everyone. Wow, I'm so glad that we ran the credits all the way to the end just to find out that some of this film was based on actual events.
Is the helicopter attack, definitely.
The actual event of Jaws being made into a movie.
Remember all that stuff I said about the MoMA? I was thinking of The Last Shark. Sorry. It's okay. Another screening, another time. We'll get there.
So I had completely forgotten. Not only does I remembered that it steals direct lines from Jaws, like, you know, all it does is eat, sleep, and make baby sharks and stuff like that. I had forgotten that it also takes lines from Jurassic Park and the soundtrack from Star Wars.
Oh yeah.
And I'll say they're adjacent. It's got a Star Wars-ish song where you get that like bum 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 bum, and then it goes off in other places.
The intro to Star Wars.
Yeah.
How did they put this? How did they release the soundtrack to this?
They didn't. As Elric pointed out,
apparently.
No, as Elric pointed out, somebody asked in the chat, where has this been all my life? And Elric wrote back, litigation. And that kind of sums up the movie. Like, this was not released in the US for a very long time. And we're still all a little confused how Severin did it. So I actually really need to email David Gregors. Elric and I will follow up with that question on our next Deep Cuts or Colors of the Dark or one of our upcoming shows, because I'm incredibly curious now, seeing just how much is taken from Jaws, just the dialogue, even the soundtrack, because it also did that dun 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 and then went off other places. So yeah, and even like Jaws 3 came into play with like, oh, people love the dolphins in Jaws 3. Let's just get some of those in there too.
And the aesthetic, I feel like the biggest aesthetic ripoff is Baywatch. Oh my God, it just feels so much. It feels like it was set in the same world as Hasselhoff could have rounded the corner any moment in that. I'm not sure how that lines up year-wise, but
we couldn't get Hasselhoff, but somebody clearly had a friend of a friend of a friend who looked like Hulk Hogan.
That was a great casting, yeah.
Yeah, so that was definitely primo casting there.
It's that's an interesting movie. I hadn't seen it in a long time, and I was honestly getting a lot of it mixed up with The Last Shark because a lot of it was Vic Morrow in my brain, and so when he's not in this, my brain starts going, "Oh yeah, that's the more dramatic version. This is definitely the as I think Becca said, it's the Silent Night, Deadly Night 2 at performance at the heart of this that is pretty remarkable. But it, you know, it's really charming in its madness. Like, you just think like this is a movie that exists in the world. My brain burns for it.
I mean, for me, the introduction of like the Home Alone goons towards the end, really excellent stuff.
Yeah, that felt like a very 90s kind of buffering plot. Like, okay, we need some filler here of let's get in these like gangster guys at the end who are going to kind of, take over everything really quickly. Yeah, it's got a lot. It's the same thing we said about Burial Ground. There's a lot of movie in that movie.
Yeah.
It also takes a particular sensibility to end with a pratfall when you know that that guy's like son was also like murdered earlier in the film, and it's very marginally addressed by the movie.
I just think that's what Americans are like. By way of Italian, like my favorite subgenre. I was writing it as we were watching this. I was going, okay, I need to find even more. But one of my favorite subgenres in horror is Florida films by way of Italian cast and crews.
There's lots of them.
Well, my triple feature right now, it's Cruel Jaws, Primal Rage, which just recently finally got a release, and it's pretty bonkers. But the ultimate being Nightmare Beach, which is just phenomenal. And all of them have, all Italian films that are set in Italy, or even Spanish ones like Pieces, they just have such a funny viewpoint of what Americans are like. Even when they cast Americans in it, somehow the Americans are learning to be Americans by way of Italian melodrama or something. And it just creates this very bizarre loop and style, I think. And I just find them hilarious, these movies.
And somebody in the chat earlier, which I think we may have answered while the movie was screening, asked if these films were dubbed. So because these were shot in America, most of the characters were not dubbed, but some of them still were. If the directors had specific actors that they really wanted, or if they had to do pickup scenes back in Italy, what they would do is they would have Italian actors and actresses read the lines very phonetically in English. A lot of times they did not even know what they were saying. So they would read them very phonetically. Then they would dub them back into English just so that they could match the mouth movements kind of, but the inflection is all off. And so if you get deep into a lot of Italian cinema, especially if you start getting into like the Giallo, the Polizieschi films and things like that, that's where you see a lot of like the weird dubbing where you're like the mouths kind of match up, but not exactly. And the inflections are all crazy.
But that doesn't explain the emotion.
It doesn't.
Like when his girlfriend's about to be eaten by a shark and Veronica, if he spent half as much time reaching out to her as he did yelling her name. Not that she deserved to live.
That guy, I know I texted you this while we were watching the movie Elric, but he reminded me so much of Ricky from Silent Night, Deadly Night 2, where everything was so emotional with eyebrows. And yeah, it was very, very, very intense actor.
We did get a question from the chat room. Patrick Bethia says, was Billy the only expert in town? Yes.
Well, apparently.
He was the only one.
He's the only one that knew that we needed to do a full autopsy on the shark, which did not happen in this movie, but we did get that line in there.
He's the only one who had seen Jaws. The only one who had gone.
So are you able, just having rewatched this, to pick out the original shark footage, like what was actually shot for this movie?
I would say that most of the underwater footage was not. So
it's grainier too.
Yeah, I would say all of the stuff with the actors, of course, all of the weird day for night stuff, like the entire first half of the movie is day for night. For some reason, because I guess sharks only attack at dusk. Maybe they were actually being scientifically accurate on that one. But anytime that it's underwater with an actual live shark, 99% that was ripped footage. What we do have in this movie is that brilliant shark with the perma grimace, who comes up out of the water, and then occasionally things get stuffed into his mouth while he's grimacing. So that was clearly a Bruno Mattei creation. But any time we're underwater, we're seeing, shoot at him, shoot. And then you see the shark kind of turn. That shark turning was guaranteed stock or taken from another movie.
Yeah.
What would you guess is the effect that they used for the shark explosion at the end there? It just sort of like breaks in half.
Oh yeah, they probably took one of the original Jaws and just cut the thing in half. That's what it looked like, paper mache.
Yeah, just kind of going everywhere. The non-ending, it was just such like a quick ending, and then oh my God, pratfall, and we're done. So yeah, it just seemed like the ending came out of nowhere, which is not too shocking. So yeah, we've got a lot of questions in chat. Everyone had questions on this one. Specifically, a lot of questions about, which we can probably answer broadly, if it was common to rip off this much stuff in these Italian ripoff films. And the answer is yes and no. Sometimes they would just rip off plot, like they would just kind of pull from plot. And then other times it was a very direct ripoff. Like there's actually a Turkish film called Col, C-O-L, that's referred to as the Turkish Jaws. That is really just Jaws. Like that's going to be a hard one to find in the US as well, because it is. The Turkish also did a large amount of ripoff films. There was this. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I said just somebody was explaining in the chat that the explosion, that it was actually just a mixture of footage from Last Shark and the original Jaws explosion. So nothing from this movie was in this movie, just two other movies mixed together, fused. But why not? Hell, imagine this movie without those parts. Jesus. All the best footage was from other movies. So well done.
Yeah, and Scott Chesborough noticed that a lot of times when they're saying great white, what we're actually looking at is a tiger shark, and it kind of goes back and forth throughout depending on what type of footage they are using. So yeah, we get a lot. There's a lot of movie here, but that's kind of Bruno Mattei for you.
Nice. Let's see. I think hitting a shark on the nose will dissuade a shark from attacking.
I've heard that as well.
I'm not sure if that works once they get a taste for human flesh. I'm not sure at this point, like when they're all revved up.
But we actually have a good question coming from Alex A. That says, moderator, please read. Is it typical for films like these to cast actors that look like stars, that look like other actors? And it is. And that is not a new thing. We see it starting back all the way in the 1950s, where they would cast actors that kind of look like other actors. One of the most famous ones, oh shit, his name just escaped my brain. I'm going to have to Google it. He did a lot of kind of Bela Lugosi monkey movies. Elric, you would know his name if I thought of it. I want to say Sonny something, but yeah, it was very commonplace starting back in the 1950s of if you had someone who looked like, you know, Jimmy Stewart. He was a Jimmy Stewart guy, the person I'm trying to think of. But yeah, so it's not unheard of to do that.
And it's still happening. It's creepy. The Charles Bronson lookalike that has a whole franchise of movies around him now. When we were last at Texas Frightmare, I guess the guy was there, and it was just it's eerie. Like it's just looking like it's a less talented Charles Bronson, but he looks exactly like him, and people are making these ripoff movies with him, and people are watching them. If there's an audience for something that's familiar, people will go to it. So it is interesting.
And there was also this tradition in Italian cinema that, you know, especially after Clint Eastwood had become such a big deal from the Dollars trilogy, to find Italian actors, like, you know, in this case of spaghetti westerns, maybe a Franco Nero and then eventually a Giuliano Gemma, and give them, you know, names that sound like Hollywood stars. So plays on Eastwood, you know, maybe there's a George Eastman, or, you know, a Gregory Stewart, or something where they're mixing and matching Hollywood star names to fool you into thinking that they're more famous than they are, but they might actually just be Italians who have been dubbed into English.
Which is also why the director has all these changes to his name. Like that, why Italian directors often had Americanized names was because the hope was that these would just be seen as American product hitting the drive-in, not as foreign films. Because as soon as somebody has the stigma of, oh, it came from Italy or some other country, that might have stopped a family from going out to that movie that night. So that's one of the main reasons. It's not just to not get sued. So.
And somebody just posted the name of the ripoff actor I was trying to remember of. He's actually a pretty decent performer. I find him rather amusing in some stuff. But Robert Siegel got Sammy Petrillo, who is the one I was thinking of, who was literally known for playing Jimmy Stewart in movies where they couldn't get Jimmy Stewart.
Well, and yeah, and the Martin and Lewis ripoff that he's talking about is Duke Mitchell. Is one of
from Gone with the Pope.
That's why he started in that. So he was part of a duo that was kind of imitating Martin and Lewis, and they actually got sued and had to stop. They actually got told, you can no longer be a duo because you guys are encroaching on what we do. So it's another ripoff. But if you haven't seen Gone with the Pope, go straight to Gone with the Pope. One of the best films.
Gone with the Pope is amazing. Everything's so wrong. I always recommend that one with a rather big precursor of there's a lot wrong in that movie.
I'm calling it now. We're going to screen this one as one of our screenings if we can.
I bet Bob would let us.
Oh, yeah.
We should reach out and see if he will let us.
That movie's phenomenal. And again, another one of these movies made of made impossibly. Like this is like what we just watched in a way is an impossible movie, right? Like that somebody has spliced these movies together and then found a way to release it eventually. That movie is another one that was like a lost movie found in a garage, and years later an editor came along and turned it into a movie, even though it was a lost thing. I love that.
Did David mention at all how he cleared any sort of legal hurdles to get this on Blu-ray?
No.
Probably why he's not on this call.
There's a reason he bailed out tonight. No,
Yeah.
I'm assuming that it was a lot of kind of skirting, a time period that a lot of, that it's been a while, that it's not going to streaming services, that he never showed it theatrically. I know they did do one theatrical screening of it in Europe, but recently, but I don't think it has done much else because of that. And that is the case for a lot of these kind of shark ripoff movies, is that, they're not allowed to be shown here. But these are still being made today. And I'm always so confused about how, like, as soon as Pacific Rim came out, Atlantic Rim came out like a month and a half later. Real movie. And so these are still being made today. And so it's always kind of a question of, are they going to get sued or not? Is it going to get completely shut down?
I feel like that makes up a huge swath of what's available at the American film market, because I'll go down there every once in a while and see posters for films I will never hear of again. And
so
they all, half of them star, Lorenzo Lamas,
So American Film Market, for those of you who don't know, American Film Market is this massive international buyers market that they have every year in Santa Monica. And it's huge, and it takes over an entire hotel. And literally you can go hotel room to hotel room, which makes it sound shady, but they're kind of transformed into offices. So you're actually kind of going office to office, looking at what each film company is offering for sales that year, usually international, but often domestic as well. And a lot of times these movies are not even made yet. People are trying to sell them on a poster. And so you can go to AFM each year and use it to really kind of gauge where trends are and where they have been. So like the year after Sharknado came out, everything I saw at AFM involved a NATO in some capacity. There was Rock NATO, there was Boulder NATO, there was like Lobster NATO. And you can also see what actors are selling really huge internationally. There was a year, probably 4 or 5 years ago, where I swear I saw Danny Trejo in like 300 films there. Is he in all of them? No. But, if they are able to sell the film based on the poster, cool, then they'll send the offer out to Danny Trejo. So it's really fascinating to go to AFM to kind of gauge where trends are. We always play, there's a group of us that play AFM bingo, where we have to click with our cell phones and take pictures of like who can find the first film with Malcolm McDowell, who can find the first film with a talking dog and things like that, which is always a blast. Okay, let's see. Do we want to do some questions from the chat?
Totally.
Excellent.
While we do that, Tony Hirschman asked if we will be doing this again. Will you guys be doing any more Zoom online viewings of other flicks? Thanks for doing this.
I think we're going to try.
Oh, I'm all in.
Excellent. Then we are too. Yes. Then let's do it.
If tonight's any sign, I have to drink more. It'll depend what we can get.
Somebody asked me on Twitter what I'd been drinking during this, and I was like, white tea with pomegranate.
Not enough. Yeah,
not enough, man. Not enough. So let's see here, guys. Let's see. Let's find a good question.
Do you want to talk about copyright violation in terms of parody?
Definitely. Let's bring in David Floyd.
All right. So, David, I'm going to invite you over, and you're welcome to turn on your video if you like. I realize I haven't mentioned this so far during this Zoom, but we do like to fold in some live questions. So if we call on you, feel free to turn on your video when you come over as a panelist. And if you don't want to use your video, that's totally fine. Just turn on your microphone.
All right, I'll come in.
Hey, David.
How's it going?
Doing well. How are you doing?
Doing excellent.
Excellent. So what was your question?
I was actually wondering if filmmakers could use the excuse of parody to get around a copyright violation.
So I'm fairly sure that is what's happening in the case of something like Atlantic Rim, that they are kind of positing it as a parody. But even that, there's a lot of gray area within that. And someday we're going to have a really fascinating with Larry Zerner, who's a well-known kind of lawyer in this realm in LA, who was also Shelley in Friday the 13th 3. But I've asked him before he became a lawyer, but I've asked him before kind of like, how do you tell the difference? And it's something that is near impossible to do because it is something that's so subjective and a lot of times left up to the viewer. Like, do you look at something like, if I was to make Sharknado, is Rocknado a ripoff or is it a parody of Sharknado? And that's where it kind of becomes a question of, well, what defines parody? Well, it's usually making fun of something. Well, is this making fun of Jaws? Could we play that card? Or is this actually just ripping off Jaws? I
guess that depends on how good your lawyer is.
Exactly. And that's a lot of, in LA, we have this beautiful thing called arbitration, meaning nothing gets handled in the courts. It all gets handled in these little private courts where you don't really hear about it until after the fact. So that's where a lot of this would end up. Yeah, but good question. And a really great kind of more philosophical, concept of parody versus ripoff.
I'm all for the ripoffs. It's all fun to me.
Definitely. Thank you so much, David.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
I just noticed William Mahaffey's in here.
All right.
Yeah, he was asking if Hulk Hogan wrestles the shark at the end.
I'm a little let down, but let's say hi to William really quick.
Support local small boutique movie theaters. If they're doing online screenings, support them.
Yes.
Otherwise,
so William runs one of Elric and mine's favorite small boutique theaters in Knoxville, Tennessee. William, how are you doing tonight?
is he still in there?
Well, I see William as a panelist, but sometimes, particularly on the fly like this, they don't have the microphone connected. So I'm going to leave William there for a second.
He's a bum anyway. It's okay.
Someone else you'd like to invite over while William sort of settles into being on the panelist side?
So I see somebody. Let's see here. Will you guys be doing?
You should be able to answer this. Is there a cyborg shark movie? I don't know.
I feel like there probably is. I feel like at some points, because the Asylum churns these things out. For companies like the Asylum, and by way of that, Sci-Fi got into it. And not all sci-fi movies are Asylum movies, but they do tend to be a lot of them. They cornered the market on sharks. And basically anything that you can do with a shark avalanche, sharkalanche, crococonda alley shark, like whatever animals you can merge with a shark, they will do at some point. So I feel like at some point there had to be like a mecha shark or a robo shark, or there will be.
Like yeah, robo shark sounds right. Also, that goes to answer that last question, which was, self-awareness, I think, is the difference. Like, the Asylum knows that everything it does is parody. Every single thing they put out is satire parody. This movie, I don't believe that the Italians, for the most part, are doing satire or parody at all. I think they just think they're making a good movie and tracing another good movie and putting it out there, and they just have no clue what human beings act like in this particular case, and getting a whole. So I think it is a real difference. That's why I think it would be, easier to prosecute in a lot of ways.
Would you say they think they're making a good movie? Because I'm not sure.
Oh yeah, people were hi-fi
earnestness. I mean, I'm not saying that they don't think that I don't know that they're going for parody, but I don't know that they're necessarily aiming very high in terms of quality either.
I would agree with that.
I don't know. Again, it could be quick. They could be moving fast. They could be shot quick, but no, they think this is a masterpiece.
Or just doubling down on that shit, just going with it. But no, I do completely agree that. And it always bothers me online when I see people post up for things like the Asylum. Like, do people not realize how bad these films are when they're making them? And the answer is, yeah, they totally do. That's why they're doing it. Is because that is what people want, is that kind of camp aesthetic. And sometimes they are done so well within that and it becomes a joy. And then other times it kind of gets, the kismet and the chemistry gets lost in there. But when you do make an Asylum shark film, yeah, that's what you're aiming for, is that kind of like camp, over the top. Ghost Shark. If you guys have seen Ghost Shark, it's a fucking amazing movie, and I highly recommend.
Well, the best example in the history of movies, and I'm glad we get this, even though the bums returned. We'll talk to him in a minute.
What's up, William?
Is Birdemic to Birdemic 2. You have
Exactly.
something that was made organically by somebody who believed they were making something special, and it's special, if depends on your definition. And then the second one, he by then has the feedback. It'd be like if there was a room two, it would be a totally different experience because the person knows they're making kind of comedy, they're making it bigger, it gets sillier, and then when you watch it, there's something about the experience that just isn't there.
Well, we did do that with Greg Sestero for Best Friends. And there is that sort of like, okay, now that you're kind of in on the joke, how does that alter the way that the audience is supposed to watch this? Because you can't make earnest camp, right? It sort of has to be determined by the audience.
Mm-hmm.
And sincerity is a big deal. So if you know that that's what they want, it's no longer sincere.
Yeah, because you want. I mean, I personally have zero interest in that kind of camp. Like personally, when the self-conscious thing. But man, like when I watch the first Birdemic, it blows me away because the people making it in between takes are giving each other high fives, going, we're killing it, we're crushing this. It's an amazing movie, and they're putting all their heart into it. And then you watch it, and it's it's a movie, which is cool. Did William leave again?
Sorry about that, William. You feel free to jump in.
William, are you still with us? Hey.
Yeah, I'm with you now.
How's it going?
I was contacting you and it lost audio whenever you said my name.
It's like 12:30 there, right?
Yeah. I got to stay up for Cool Jaws.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Okay, so impressions of Cruel Jaws. What'd you think?
I actually watched it when the Blu-ray first came out, but I watched the Snyder cut. I'm not sure which cut you guys watched. And I'm not sure how much of a difference there is, but it seemed like there was some other random footage crammed in there.
Yeah, there was a lot in this one. This was whatever Severin had on file. So I'd say that we probably watched the same one that was on the Blu-ray because this was from their scans. So yeah. But I just wanted to bring you on to give a big shout out to everybody to please be supporting your local independent cinema during this time. William runs one of our favorite movie theaters in Knoxville, which you should all be going to. He has an amazing festival, the Knoxville Horror Film Festival. And it is people like him that we want to see everybody supporting during this pandemic so that the small independent cinemas can stay alive and there can be places that you can go see Cruel Jaws at the cinema still.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You are so welcome. Oh my gosh. William, have a great night.
You too. Good to see you guys.
See you, one. I don't think he even asked us a question.
I don't think he did either. I just wanted to give his theater a plug because I wanted to make it through this.
I love that he's talking about the Snyder cut. That's the only Snyder cut that matters to him. That's what he said in the chat, which I appreciate. Well done. Well played.
So one of my favorite questions that has popped up here is, what is a movie that we would love to see a ripoff film of?
Oh, wow. Good question.
That's a good question. That one requires a little bit. And I also saw, what other ripoff movies would we recommend? In which case I would definitely say most of the other sharksploitation films. So we didn't get into that too much up at the top, but if you enjoyed Cruel Jaws, you're in luck because you have a couple of decades of shark ripoff movies to catch up on. And all of them offer something completely different and something batshit crazy. Like Tintoria is one of my favorites. That is a Mexican one, the tiger shark.
Soon, yeah.
And that one's coming out soon. From which company? Is Code Red doing that?
Yeah, I think so.
Or one of their versions, Scorpion or something like that. That one is a threesome at the beach and a tiger shark. Like literally, it's like a softcore threesome movie. And oh yeah, there's a shark attacking people too. So that one's pretty wild.
I did. So I have the other podcast I do, Pure Cinema. One of our first episodes way back 4 years ago, if you can find it, is on ripoffs. We just did with Steven Scarlatta, who wrote the Jodorowsky Dune documentary. And he knows more about ripoffs than anyone I know. And we had some real good picks in there, but easily my favorite is Abby, the Exorcist, the Black Exorcist ripoff. I just think it's a great movie. It's really entertaining. The performance is incredible, but it's also a movie that's just like this. It got one weekend in theaters, made a ton of money, got sued, never got released again. So,
but Abby's a really good movie.
Yeah, like it's
before you compare it to this one, the actress in Abby is really freaking good.
Yeah, it's really fun and silly, but then there's other parts that are just, it is so blatant that you can see why. But it's different enough in my mind to be an entertaining movie. But their ripoffs can be their own thing. I mean, that's the cool thing.
But also, ripoffs in Italian cinema are a dime a dozen in the 70s and 80s. But I don't know how many films I've seen that actually just full on lift footage from other movies.
Yeah.
What other stuff like that is out there?
There's a couple of those, but none that do it this blatantly. Like some of the cannibal films will lift jungle footage from each other and stuff like that, but it's usually stock footage, and it opens up a question of, what are they just getting their stock footage from the same place? And that
hack, you got that hack Kubrick lifting from Ridley Scott for The Shining. I actually just finally saw a little interview where Ridley Scott was on one of those roundtables for the THR thing, and he was just talking about how Kubrick just calls him up and says, "Do you have any footage that I can use for this thing?" And he literally just gives him the footage from Blade Runner. So this helicopter stuff that they shot, so it's kind of fun.
And then there's also the one that I consider the famous, where it's two films using the same footage, is both of the Exorcist prequels. Dominion, and I can't remember what the name of the other one was. It may have just been the Exorcist prequel, but they both started making the same movie and were using kind of the same pool of footage, but then they hired on another director, and then somebody went over here to make their movie. And somehow we ended up with two different movies that were both using about an hour's worth of the same footage.
And both incredibly dull. Like, I was so excited to finally see Paul Schrader's director's cut of that when it finally came, and it's just like, no, it's still as boring as the other one. It's kind of wild. But yes, that is a good example of that, though.
Yeah. So, I mean, sometimes shit happens, and it happens. And yes, Robert Siegel is correct. There is a ton of Death Wish ripoffs. We saw a ton of Beastmaster with ripoffs right after Beastmaster came out. You can always follow these. Like, even just earlier this year, I did an entire episode of my Patreon show focused on post-apocalyptic roller skating movies, which we see two surges of those. The first one right after Rollerball, and the second one after Solar Babies. But every single one of them focuses as like a ripoff of one of those two movies. And yes, Robert, you're like on with these. Gremlins ripoffs. Right after Gremlins, we had the little creatures ripoffs, where we had Ghoulies, we had Fuzz Bucket, we had Critters. There was just a whole bunch of them back to back. Munchies, thank you. Munchies was fun. But there was just a whole ton of them back to back. So yes.
That Death Wish was huge in terms of Italian action films. That and The French Connection and Dirty Harry, or in The Godfather. And those like generated an entire decade of ripoffs in Italian cinema.
Completely.
Well, a lot of them quite good.
Yeah, the New Bev played a lot of last year they played a lot of the Godfather ripoffs. It'd just be like Black Godfather or whatever. Every night there was something playing for a while there, which was great.
Yeah, and Robert, who I just discovered is from VCU, hell yeah, it's where I graduated from, is just mentioned Animal House. There's just tons of these, and we still see it any single time there is a big movie, and we saw it a lot in the 90s as well, right after we had Singles and some of the other kind of despondent 90s movies. That's where you end up with things like Spank the Monkey and some of these other ones that were kind of ripoffs of this like Clerks aesthetic that we were getting right around that time. There was a whole bunch of movies right in there as well. So these are still a really integral part of the movie landscape that we see. But yes, and so Joe is asking, are we going to get a Wonder Woman ripoff? We have had many, many superhero ripoffs. You just don't see them as much anymore. But you do see them.
Captain Marvel?
I actually love Captain Marvel.
I still haven't seen that one.
My daughter loves it. Remember, I got her Goose last year when we went to Disneyland. So it was a little goose doll. You don't remember, but
I do remember that. Yes. No, I mean, I think there's something for everyone. That's the great thing about movies. It's like, somebody's Wonder Woman or Captain Marvel is the thing that gets them into movies. This Cruel Jaws is the movie that makes somebody's day. It's such a anytime I hear anyone complain about movies or say they're over movies or tired, I always just think it's the most idiotic thing, because if you change lanes for 5 seconds, you're in a whole different world. We've got so many different trends. I like this last question. Or down here, which movie would you pair this with?
Hey, Andrew, how you doing?
Andrew's still in a shark mood. Do you have one that you'd pair it with? Obviously, I would say you should check out Last Shark because it is different.
I would say Last Shark because that is what this is pulling from a lot. So Last Shark is just kind of a fun movie across the board. It's got Vic Morrow in it, and it's another one like this where even though that it is sharksploitation straight up, it is a very, very watchable movie. I would almost say that after this, as a palate cleanser, go a little bit higher brow with your shark film, and consider something a little bit better, or kind of expand into a much larger aquatic horror and go with something more contemporary. Like Sea Fever this year was great. And kind of get a little bit of different creatures. If you're looking for something that definitely kind of fits inside of this very traditional sharksploitation, Piranha's great, is a really tight movie. Alligator was in this same realm.
Tentacles has some good stuff.
Tentacles has an awesome soundtrack. Like,
yeah, the soundtrack's great.
That soundtrack.
The one I discovered a movie this year that it becomes a sharksploitation but doesn't start that, called Cyclone. I was doing a natural disasters episode, and it's actually really fun. It's like a cyclone comes, a plane goes down into the ocean, and then everyone's on like a little passenger dinghy who survives, and then they're being circled by killer sharks, and at some point they actually start eating each other to stay alive on the boat, and feeding this one pet little dog in a scene that would make a lot of people beyond triggered. But the sharks look really real, and this is Rene Cordona Jr., whose dad's also Rene Cordona. It's a long line of exploitation coming through these two father-son relationship, but it's pretty fun. It's on Amazon.
True story. I rented Cyclone in high school. Back when I was renting everything that was on the video store shelf, I rented Cyclone because it has a shark on the cover. And I got to the dog scene, turned it off, and I have never made it back to it.
Yeah, well, I was watching it because I don't usually, as long as I know it's not real, you know what I mean? I can, but I was watching it thinking, I think a lot of people wouldn't get past that scene because it's pretty crazy. But then, of course, they're actually eating each other as well, so it gets pretty bonkers. But the important thing is it has Hugo Stiglitz in this one as well. So anytime I get on here, I get to plug a Hugo Stiglitz, just so people watching know that my passion for Night of a Thousand Cats, one of the greatest things ever created.
Plugging Matt.
That movie is like no other movie, and I mean that in a good and terrible way. I don't know what.
Night of a Thousand what?
Night of a Thousand.
Night of a Thousand Cats.
It's like the guy.
The slugs.
It's basically
it's become his slugs. It really has.
No, and I think unfortunately the Amazon version isn't very good. But if you can get the Code Red DVD, it's a guy who looks like the guy off those Heineken ads for The Most Interesting Man Alive. He looks like him. He's basically James Bond. He's in a helicopter. He's hitting on girls in a helicopter. So he'll fly down as you're sunbathing in your backyard. He'll go down. He'll pick you up, take you to his castle with his manservant, and then he'll feed you to 1,000 cats and take your head off and put it in a box. And it is just utterly, and it's like 70 minutes long. It's perfect. But Hugo Stiglitz is in that. So
it feels like Night of a Thousand Cats may be the most perfect pairing with Cruel Jaws.
Yes, I think, yes, we just answered your question.
I'm curious, as someone whose biggest fear of water is actually jellyfish, is there a good jellyfish horror film?
There's the Herschel Gordon Lewis jellyfish film called Sting of Death. I think he produced it. I don't think he.
Oh no, he's that guy. He's the guy whose box
they just did a box set.
William Fruit.
William Fruit, yes. They just did this massive box set release. I think Arrow did it, of all of his films. So he directed Sting of Death, and it was produced by Herschel Gordon Lewis, also made in Southern Florida. And so this one, it is giant jellyfish creatures. It's not a good jellyfish film, but if you are looking for killer jellyfish, this definitely is in there. Honestly, the one that I mentioned before, Sea Fever, is closest to jellyfish that I think that you could come.
That's a good call. Like,
yeah,
it's got these weird jelly. It's from last year. It's actually it's on Amazon, probably VOD right now.
Did we see that at Williams Festival at Knoxville?
No, we saw it at Panic Fest.
Panic Fest, thank you. But yeah, I think it's on Amazon right now, and it's really good.
We're getting some recommendations for Grief.
Yeah, William Griff. So that's the name of the director. Yeah,
mm-hmm.
and a big box set just came out from Arrow of his stuff. He did who I do the other show with, Brian. He's been saying Whiskey Mountain of that box is a very good one. I haven't seen any of these yet, so
yeah, I'm anxious to dive into that one. There is also kind of the if you all are looking for the trauma of aquatic horrors. There is a movie called Plankton from the 90s that also, and this is like if Romeo and Juliet involved plankton, this is where it goes. So that is one. I don't know where you find it now. I feel like it's probably streaming on Amazon or somewhere. You could probably find it on YouTube actually. But Plankton, go in this one knowing that I kind of preface it as it's the trauma of aquatic horrors, but I find it to be really amusing.
Do you want to give a chance at some of these raised hands? Or
Yeah.
How do you see raised hands?
I can't see raised hands, so
Oh, okay. Well, I'll just bring them over.
feel free.
Scott Chesborough. Scott, I'm going to move you over. Let's see what you got.
I think Scott has a snazzy podcast too. Scott, you with us?
I'm with you, but I'm adjusting my camera.
Elric, are you smoking a cigar? I've never seen you
No.
smoke it.
I was just
No.
pulling an effect to look like a character out of that movie.
I'm not smoking a cigar.
Hey, Scott, how is it going?
Good. So I'm really curious as to you've kind of touched on it, but I'm really curious as to how such blatant ripoffs are even managed to make it to the States. Is it because there's a decision by the major studios that in a lot of cases that they don't think it'll really affect their bottom line, or they just attack it remorselessly and it really never gets anywhere, doesn't get the distribution, or doesn't draw in much money because it's attacked?
Well, there's no clear they will always do this. Studios will always be driven by money because they're studios. I mean, ultimately, everybody is in the film business to make money, including Bruno Mattei. That's why these films exist. So
Sure.
if something like a movie shows up and it makes 14 million at the box office in 2 days, then Universal is going to suddenly notice and say, oh no, you're taking money from Jaws, shut it down. It kind of a lot of times will become a question of what is it going to cost us to sue them? Is it worth it? Are they actually making any money off of this right now? Is it worth it to prosecute? But at the same time, every single time I would say it's always going to be a financial decision. You will always have one phantom cut. Now, Phantom Cut happened a decade ago, but that was where somebody of their own volition re-edited the Phantom Menace into a movie, like a good film, put it up online. And for some reason, George Lucas's company said, oh, we should sue this guy. And he wasn't making any money off of it. There was no profitability to it, but they sued him until everybody on the internet started freaking out and saying, oh God, you guys are horrible people. And then they backed off. But so sometimes it isn't profit driven. Sometimes it might just be you're pissing us off. So there's never kind of a clear cut.
Some of the studios have killer legal teams who go after everything. I've heard that about Universal. My guess with this movie, the reason it's finally getting cleared is, unlike Last Shark, which actually made money in a different country, this model is dead. Across the world. The model of the ripoff, I mean, and they might still exist, but the model of Italy making all these movies that were just quickly parodying, ripping off, and making tons of money, that just doesn't exist anymore. So my guess is it doesn't appear like it probably appears like a little fly now, and they can just swat it away. Whereas had that 20 years ago, it wouldn't have seemed like it would have seemed like an encroachment. So it is. My guess is that's probably what has changed, and maybe it's just a lawyer or a certain producers died and something freed up that was a problem before. The part I am like with a lot of the people on here, I am most shocked about the Star Wars music. There's no way, it changes at the last beat, but it's really, to me, that would be usually, as we all know, music is the worst of all things. To assume if you even come close, you're done. And there's still a lot of great classic movies that can't be screened very easily because of their use of soundtracks. They might have even had permission once, but then they lost the permission.
Yep.
So Killer of Sheep was one that took a long time to come out. It's one of the best movies, but just the way it used music created a real problem. So it is interesting, but we'll try to get an answer for everyone by the time we do another one from David to find out, what he had to go through maybe to get this one.
Yeah, I'd be really curious if the calculation was, it's not worth our time to try and stop. And it's so old at this point that
Yeah, if
it
there's no
doesn't really-
theatrical and it's going straight to Blu-ray, maybe there's a limited amount of Blu-rays, like maybe that's a 3,000 run.
Mhm.
You can do that math and go, maybe it's not worth a legal case.
Well, I did see somebody post in the chat, and I'd heard the rumor that Shout Factory had actually courted putting this out and had backed off a couple of years ago because they did realize how much was actually ripped off in the movie.
Yeah, they're not fearless like David Gregory. David Gregory came from the Blue Underground world, so he's
he's just gonna fucking do it. Let's just shoot that shit.
42nd Street style. I love it.
Thank you so much, Scott.
Thanks.
Thanks, Sam.
Should we go out to, let's see, we've got Ken Lamplug.
Sure.
And also, by the way, if you're seeing other questions in the chat, in the Q&A, just jump in with that.
Okay. I see a lot of people searching for Plankton, as they should be. Ken, are you with us? I know, this is going to be my new Slugs, and it's nowhere near as good as Slugs.
I feel like I've heard of it. I think I've heard you mention it before.
I think I've talked about it a lot with Steven Scarlatta, who may have
Okay.
been the first person who pointed me towards it. So he's gotten a lot of love on this one.
Yeah.
Ken, are you with us?
All right, well, maybe while Ken's getting it together, let's bring over Robert Siegel.
Nice. Yeah, Robert has been spot on with all those films that like spurred the rip-off movements.
All right, Robert or Ken, whoever's ready first.
How's it going?
Hey, Robert, how is it going?
I've actually worked in movie testing for over 20 years, so I have stories.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I've tested movies that have never ever been released, and yeah. But I'm curious about movies where a famous actor, young in their career, shot something, and then producers acquired it and did something with it. I knew there was like a Sandra Bullock movie. I think through Roger Corman, something in the Amazon, and they sat on it and released it after Speed, stuff like that. There's a lot of good stuff like that out there.
Yeah, I've heard of a couple where they've shot like 10 minutes with this actor 30 years ago, but then they lift the footage and suddenly he's talking to this person on the phone in the car.
Silent Witness with Alec Guinness.
Okay, I was like, I remembered one.
Mute Witness, yeah.
Mute Witness, that was it. Okay, I was like, I remember that.
But Guinness did it because
years after Alec Guinness passed away.
Yeah, but Guinness did it as a favor to the director, which is pretty cool of him. Like he actually did it like just because the director saw him in an airport and went up to him and asked him, and then he said, "Sure, I'll come and do it." And he never got to see it, but it does speak to how cool Alec Guinness was in a way, you know.
The modern version of it is sort of like what Bruce Willis does now. Stallone's starting to do it, where they pay him $1 million a day, and he shoots 2 days. Like there's the new Bruce Willis movie. He's in the whole movie. He was only there 2 days shooting footage.
So that's become very commonplace. And when you talk to casting directors,
contract.
Yeah, it's the Brando. It's straight up the Brando contract.
Or the Boris Karloff. I mean, these things have been like Karloff on what's the one that 5 people directed? What is it? The
Creeping Terror.
The Terror. The Terror.
The Terror.
You know, the Terror. Corman's just like, oh, we just finished a picture with Boris. We have 2 more days on his contract. We're making another movie. They shot in 5 days, 5 different directors. I think you've got Ford Coppola directed a day, Jack Hill directed a day, Monty Hellman directed a day, Jack Nicholson directed a day, Corman directed a day. I mean, to me, my dream was always to get that poster signed by all those names because it's like the great, and it's not a very good movie. But
was that the You Will See a Man Turned Inside Out movie?
No, that's that.
Okay,
Fishman thing. Yeah.
When I first moved to LA, I worked at Roger Corman for 2 years.
Nice.
So the running joke was this: Strip to Kill. They took that script and remade it every year. And that was it was like an inside joke, but they go, we're remaking Strip to Kill again, which is the plot of a female cop goes undercover to solve a murder at a strip club. they remade it every year.
That's funny. Monty Hellman once told me that when he worked for Roger, he said every single thing Roger ever made was just Key Largo. It's the poster he had on his wall. It was his favorite movie. He just would find some way to remake Key Largo. So maybe that became Strip to Kill over time.
And then we're friends with Rodman Flender, who we had on the show a couple of times, who went on to be a director, but he started out with Corman. And he was there during the Frankenstein years when Corman was trying some weird shit and going a little bit different. So he has completely different Corman stories about it. Yeah.
I was there when they made the Fantastic Four movie. So
whoa,
nice.
Yeah. I have a poster. I took a bunch of the posters because it was about to come out and they got shelved. So, and they made quite a good documentary about the making of it.
Yeah, no, that's pretty good. Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, that was the holy grail for a long time of the movies you couldn't see.
Oh, it got shelved because of Chris Columbus. So you know the whole story, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's wild.
Awesome. Thank you.
Well, thanks for talking to me.
So much, Robert.
Yeah.
That's
okay.
a perfect viewpoint.
Yeah, it is. Oh my gosh, yeah.
Ken, are you around? Do you want to jump in? If not, I'll go out to David Geister. All right, David, whenever you're ready.
Hey guys.
Hey, David.
Hey Rebecca, this is if you can see, this is what's left of my Blue Moon number. This is the second one. And I swear to God, I needed a third one by the time the movie was done. So thank you.
Right?
I believe it.
I should have stepped up from the tee. I know.
Hey, I didn't want to say anything. No, to each their own. But in all honesty, I really enjoyed this. And I have to admit, I really like this approach to sharing, in this case, a train wreck with fellow enthusiasts. I mean, is it possible that this is one of the really positive things that's coming out of this whole damned pandemic? Which is not my question. I'm sorry, but doesn't that seem like one of the few positives?
I have to say that this is like something that Elric and I have really explored this year more than any others. Is Elric and I, since we started doing shows together like 8-9 years ago now, we always discovered that is what kind of connects us together. Is we are both enthusiasts of, even if it's bad, it's good. Whatever we consider to be the worst movie is someone's favorite movie. Elric always uses the example of Microwave Massacre, which we both find to be a little but someone has a poster in his bedroom of Microwave Massacre. I'm paraphrasing you right now.
No, that was dead on.
Was it? Okay, yeah. But through this, through us getting to, kind of work within a new show and bringing everything online, that's what we're kind of hoping to bring to everybody, is this love of all cinema and a respect and historical significance that even this has a lot of historical significance, because honestly, these ripoff movies are, there's 50 of these made every single time we get something like a Jaws.
Sure.
But I agree. Yeah, I agree with you, David. I mean, because both of us spend a lot of time on Zoom teaching. I think one of the things that's happened in the pandemic is some of these companies have scrambled to get better with their streaming abilities, with their Zoom. I work on one called Teams, which is like Zoom. And in this year, every couple months, we would get messages from them. Oh, now we're doing this. Now we're doing this, because they know what's at stake. And because of that, it's getting easier and easier. And I would have been very skeptical. We always wanted to do screenings in LA, but you start to realize you're talking to the same group of cinephiles. And our show, I know from the shows we've done in the past, a lot of them are popular in different countries. And even though the time zone can be
number 2 in Croatia,
and number 1. Oh, and we're coming for that number 1 show.
Are you talking about current, or are you referring to Shockwaves?
Oh no, this is current.
One,
Colors of the
that's
Dark.
Outstanding. That's
we
really
get weird little updates each week from our platforms, and we were number 2 in Croatia.
We'll probably find out that Shockwaves was number 1, but whatever.
Well, at the risk of taking you down the rabbit hole, I was and still am a fan of Shockwaves. I just that was like, man.
Yeah, we are too. We are too.
Heaven, So I'm just glad that you are still creating content. And but to get back to that, the concept of train wrecks, you know, did I answer my own question? Is there something inherently fascinating? I think there is, about an earnest effort on somebody's part that just goes awry.
Completely. I mean, The Room, Things, there are so many movies throughout history that we embrace as cinema lovers and say, there is so much wrong with this, that there is something so right about it. Birdemic being a great example as
But
well.
to have a train wreck, one has to have a train. And none of those films can afford a train. So I would go so far as to say they're not train wrecks. Train wrecks are the movies where you get the guy winning the Oscar and their next film is a train wreck because they got the big toy set and then they blew it.
So if it isn't a train wreck, what's like the next? Is it the hand cart? You know, that you see in the old movies? You know,
Because I think that's why our heart goes out to these movies a little more, because everyone knows how hard it is to make any movie, and so if you're making it for nothing, then we can forgive a lot. And so if it doesn't quite work, you can go, okay, I get it, and I see what's being done here. But when you see those movies being made for $100-200 million that don't work at all, your brain goes, okay, so how many hands did this go through to fail this big?
Yeah, and that's usually what it is in most cases where we see like a $200 million movie. It's that they had 30 writers, 40 executives, brought in 6 directors, and
there was no strong central voice or vision that could basically say, look, I'm Cecil B. DeMille, do what I fucking tell you to do. Right?
Well, and sometimes, and I heard the best, I don't know if we talked about this last time, but I heard the best interview with Del Toro after he won the Oscar. He did this interview where he just kind of explained, like, you know, he took a year off afterwards and didn't accept any offers or hold anything where he would not agree to what would be next, because he said so many bad movies are made in the glory period right after, because you have all the power. And I saw Friedkin do it. There's so many directors who just jumped in. Sometimes that's great, you get to make your passion project. So I don't think it's always just because lots of cooks come in. I think sometimes it's an inflated sense of ego that suddenly goes, oh well, I'm indestructible, and they make something that just doesn't really connect. Maybe 20 years later it starts to become a cult movie, but it's its own. I'm sure we'll pick one to screen if we make this a series. We'll try to find one of those films that is interesting and fun, but maybe shows that kind of folly, you know.
That's a really good point. And I'm monopolizing. I didn't mean to do that.
That's right. We're here to just hang out.
Well, you're hanging out in the Descent set, so yeah.
You like that, huh?
That's a great movie. I love it.
Oh God, yes, yeah. Don't even get me started. Oh yeah. But the whole idea of a director who's coming hot off, you know, all the success, and they, in a sense, at least in the old days, you know, Michael Cimino, anyone, you know, here's a blank check, do what you want. And I mean, I'm a visual artist. That's what I do. I draw and paint and sculpt for a living. And I know for a fact that my best work is often done when I am given some parameters and limitations. So you work towards that. That may just be me, but
no, creativity thrives under those restrictions.
Well, yeah, you have to be more creative, and it also helps shape your thinking a little more. So I wonder if that's the case. But anyhow, thanks for letting me ramble. I was just going to say that in regards to even this movie, which I actually really did enjoy, although I was confusing it with what was the one with Vic Morrow?
Last Shark.
Yeah,
also known as The Great White.
Yeah, I couldn't, even though I knew better. I kept confusing. But one thing that we, excuse me, I'm choking down here in the caverns. It's all the fungus. One of the things we always do on our little podcast is to raise a glass to the artists who bring us the movies. You know, we literally say, you know, here's to the artists who bring us the movies. We appreciate all your work. And I really truly do. So even in some of the worst dreck, I keep thinking somebody busted their butt. They had to get up in the morning. They had to go pick up an actor, actress, and they put up with all this crap. And then at the end of the day, they've got to live with it. So I just have a lot of respect for creative people who go through that process and willingly go through it over and over and over.
And that is so true. Because I mean, even just looking at this movie from a pure filmmaking standpoint, it was shot outside. It is a total bitch to shoot outside, like in general.
I can imagine. Yeah.
And I can imagine shooting on a boat. That's a whole nother thing. And then shooting with a mechanical shark inside the water. I mean, Bruno Mattei was going through all of the rigor here, even if what he ended up with was little draws. There was still, you know, it's still a miracle.
And I'll take a great scene. a great moment. I'll take like the person lighting themselves on fire while they're trying to like
Yeah.
I'll take one moment like that in a movie that will stick with me or make me laugh because it means, somebody came up with that gag,
Yeah, I know. As she was lifting the gas can, I thought, is this going to really happen? And
Yeah.
it sure the hell did. So anyhow, thanks everybody. Cheers.
Thanks,
and
David.
I hope we get a chance to do this again soon.
To Bruno Mattei.
Here. Hey, and to I don't want to jinx us, to 2021.
Yes.
Yes.
Let's get a vaccine cocktail. That'd be nice. Everyone just gets it in a cocktail form. Let's do it.
Scott Cheeseborough is our cocktail man. Well, I'll have him work on it.
Okay,
Work on
I
that.
like it.
Work on it. Negative.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
degrees.
Take care.
All right, what do you guys think? We're getting close to 10 o'clock. We do some more from the chat. Do you want to call on someone else from?
Let's take one more of the hand raises because I see some of them have been sitting there for a while, and then we'll call it a Cruel Jaws.
All right, let's bring on Jules Minton. And
while you set that up, we could just tell people if they're looking to follow us. So if they want to ask follow-up questions, they could probably Twitter for Colors of the Dark is the easiest way to get a quick response. I think we're a little faster on there. But if anyone has anything hanging after this.
Yeah, we are Colors of the Dark on Twitter. You can also find us under Rebekah McKendry and Elric Kane on Twitter, also on Instagram and Facebook under Colors of the Dark as well. And our Deep Cut show, or our Patreon show, is Deep Cuts. And that's where you can listen to the weird stuff you can't see anywhere else. We will talk about it on our Patreon show. Excellent.
And we should. Do you guys have any way for sorry, Jules, half a second. Do you have any way for your subscribers to upvote what the next movie in this series should be?
We do actually. We can do polls on
That's
Twitter.
What I have is a suggestion. I find when it comes to cheese, nothing is quite as cheesy as a really, really bad musical film.
See,
And,
I'm all about
Apple,
some
the Apple
musicals.
is amongst my favorites.
Right, Elric. I have been trying to get Elric to watch The Apple literally for 6 years. 6 years.
I would do that one, but otherwise Jules will have to sub for me the week we go. Cheesy musicals, but The Apple is one I was.
Golan. The whole thing is that Golan was so sincere about making a masterpiece.
I keep trying. Yeah, The Apple for me, it is everybody looks at Phantom of the Paradise as, oh, it's a horror musical. It's okay. But you have to realize they were trying the same thing with The Apple. They were attempting for it to be a horror musical with the Adam and Eve Faustian legend just as much as you see it.
It was a biblical musical.
Yeah.
It's
the devil is in it.
With a guest appearance by God at the end.
Elric, there's an orgy scene. Come on.
But to answer your question and Alex's, in terms of S&M, I don't like to submit. I like to choose what I watch. I don't uptick votes. When somebody chooses, that's why I do the podcast. I like to decide what I watch. As soon as somebody goes, hey, you need to watch this, I tend to, it's like Becca knows this. If she recommends a film, 2.5 years later, I will watch it and they'll be like, that was great. I wish I'd gotten to it sooner. I'm terrible when so I've always been like that about what I watch. I don't know why, but I'd be open.
Well, Rebekah, keep pushing him towards.
I will. I've started.
I'll do Apple. I'll do the Apple. I'll do it. I'll say it right now. I'm in for the Apple.
So true story. For years I had been trying to get, and this isn't a cheesy musical. This is just a damn fucking good musical, Hedwig and the Angry Inch. I had been trying to get Elric to watch it for years. And it reached a point where he had a kidney stone. And I'm telling your crazy, embarrassing medical stories on air now. He was on the couch in pain, on painkillers, and could not move. And he was like, I need movies to watch. And I texted him, was like, I'm showing up at your door and we're watching Hedwig. And we did. And that's what it took for me to get him to watch a musical.
And it was better than the pain I was suffering. I thought it was great. It was a great movie.
I don't like ordinary musicals. I mean, I no way I'm watching, even though I've heard it's hilarious, Cats. Yeah. Or
Cats isn't an ordinary musical.
Or The Prom, or
Prom I found amusing. It has its moments.
But something that's truly awful, like
The
and,
apple.
and completely ill. And it's one of those things where you just say, this doesn't exist. How can this exist?
See, you're talking to a woman who's sitting in front of a Grease 2 poster.
Where's your Xanadu poster? You need a Xanadu poster.
Xanadu, surprisingly, not as much my jam as Grease 2.
Okay.
Like Xanadu's, it's like ephemeral, like this very kind of, it's like a fevered dream for me. Grease 2 is like, it's meat, it's good. So
I like Grease.
that's a whole nother show.
Just another throwaway. Have either of you heard of even a film which I had the pleasure of seeing, and it seems to have gone completely underground, called Millennium Day, which is a film so bad that Joe Estevez has taken it off of his credits on IMDb, and he's the star. Joe Estevez, the least of the Estevez family.
The father of all the others. Yeah, I don't think I've seen that one.
We may have to hunt that one down for some deep.
It might be worth your hunting down. It is truly awful.
Okay.
In a very amusing way.
My interest is piqued.
I mean, the aliens in it are called Kardashians, and this was long before the Kardashians, gained fame.
Well,
these aliens named the Kardashians.
Well, the aliens on Star Trek were also the Kardashians.
Oh, really?
Or without an H,
Nine.
I think without an H, they're Cardassians. Right?
Cardassians. Thank you. Yes, I was like, I know some Deep Space Nine shit here.
Yeah,
they're close. They're close.
Yeah.
So holy shit! I just found I was gonna bring this up. I'm rewatching Krull, one of the greatest movies ever made, for Pure Cinema, and realized the lead actor, who I didn't see in anything else, he was in Deep Space Nine as one of the main characters. I did not know that.
Which one?
The guy with the beard. I can't remember his name. William something. He's just one of those actors. He's a pretty boy back then, but I hadn't seen him in much. But then I looked up his credits. It said that towards the end he was in a bunch of that Star Trek. So.
Ooh, okay. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much, Jules. It had been a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much.
I look forward to the trio of you in the future.
Yeah, me
Thank
too.
you.
Good night, Jules. So we just to wrap things up on a completely different note, knowing your guys' taste, particularly Elric, in terms of things that are sort of David Lynchian, I heard that Lars von Trier is going to finish The Kingdom.
Yeah, I heard that too, which is fantastic. I love The Kingdom.
Like,
I love Udo.
blew my mind.
Well, yeah, and also Udo is having a year, like Baccarat, if you guys haven't seen something, which has some Lynchian vibes in a Western, but Udo Kier is really good in it. He gives like a real performance, not a campy, big Udo performance. He gives a really grounded, interesting, I thought it was one of the better performances of the year, to be honest.
What was the name of that title again?
It's called Baccarat. It's it's getting a lot of love in end of the year lists. It's a Brazilian.
Oh, Brazil.
Made Aquarius the year before.
Labor Mendoza.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And multiple people had kind of kept at me to watch it, and I was a little like, I'll get to it.
So you watch shit when other people.
Well, when I have to do my year-end review type lists, I sometimes get to it. But it was actually really good, and as soon as I heard about Lars doing that, I was like, well, that's really interesting for him to go back to genre, and he can kind of get away with anything because that's funny too. I've always felt Garth Marenghi's Dark Places was directly mocking, The Kingdom mostly. Like I felt like that was one of the big ones it was making fun of, which I loved. So, but yeah, I'm into it, man. I'm all about Lars doing more. Anything to get him out of his depression. He has to keep making movies.
Yeah.
I hate to see him. I saw an interview with him, which just made me very sad. He just seemed so down and in the dumps about life that I was like, oh no, get this guy a movie,
Well, this is it for us for 2020, at least in terms of USC events. So are you guys...
Wait, this is a USC event?
I mean, I know you're affiliated with another educational institution somewhere in the city of Los Angeles.
We'll pull you over eventually.
DM me an offer.
We'll get you over to the Trojans.
I don't mind visiting. This is fun. I respect you, Alex. I'll show up and play. And Becca knows I respect her, or whatever it is we do.
Whatever
We do to each other. I don't know.
I don't know anymore.
Antagonize, whatever.
That's basically it. But yeah, so I am excited to keep this going. So Elric and I, we will be back with Colors of the Dark the second week of. Are we at the second week of January that we're back?
It'll be like, no, it's around the 6th or something, I think.
I am so excited about the guest we have for that.
Yes, that's gonna be fun. It ties into one of our favorite movies of the year. So
we did our top 10 list. Actually, he was 2 slots on my top 10 list.
He has 2 slots, and yes, and he could have had a third because there's one you haven't seen that I think you will like.
I have on my queue to watch
really
sometime before we come back. So he like owned this year. So he's our guest when we come back. And then we've also got deep cuts, and we're watching. What is the one that you sent me? The new Maya?
Yeah, no, there's a movie called Maya that I came across that looks really interesting from 88, 89, Italian film, but shot in Mexico about Mayan ruins. So it would play with the ruins. I liked it a lot. It's really a supernatural, somebody's being killed on the Mayan ruins and some dark forces coming and kind of killing people off. But we always find, odd
weird shit.
Mostly stuck on VHS type stuff. So
that's our deep cuts. Yeah.
I respect the 80-something who stuck around this long. Jeez,
yeah. Oh my gosh, I can't believe there's still 86 people listening to us.
With every question, the numbers dwindle, but we'll be like Brad Pitt and sign every autograph.
I can talk more about Grease too if you guys need. I mean, that's where. Yeah. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we will be continuing this in January, hopefully. And but
more likely to be a once a month thing, probably from the look, where we'd hopefully we have to still have our conversation about it, but that would be the goal, right?
Yeah, I think once a month would be awesome. And so hopefully we can hit you all with a title soon and get the RSVPs in.
Excellent.
Yay!
Thank you all, and
thank you everybody.
Have a great end of the year.
Happy New Year's, everybody.
Thanks for listening or watching.
Good night.